Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Shab'an, on this Friday, the 29th of January 2021. As usual, we are broadcasting live to Luton on 105.1 FM and our partner stations, including Sheffield Link FM, Peterborough, Salam, Derby, Nottingham, across many of our partner stations, and also nationally via the Inspire FM app, via the Inspire FM website. Last but not least, of course, we are always streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. So do tune in. Do remember to like our show tonight. Do remember to leave us your comments. And most importantly, try to join tonight's discussion and debate. Get your voices heard. 01582 481 822. 01582 481 822 is the number here in the studio. Right. 07779 481 822. 07779 822. That is the number you need if you wanna send an SMS or a WhatsApp tonight to get your comments across to our panelists. We are continuing to broadcast live from our home studios. So any technical issues, we do apologize in advance. Number of stories we're going to be covering this evening, God willing. We're going to be starting off with an incredible report. We're going to be speaking to a number of experts in this area. The combined wealth of the world's 10 richest men has increased by 400 billion. That's absolutely incredible. Combined wealth of the world's 10 richest men has increased by 400 billion during the coronavirus pandemic, according to Oxfam. I mean, that is incredible statistics. When we're talking about millions becoming unemployed, millions relying upon the food banks, we find that the billionaires have become a lot richer. We're going to be discussing with Oxfam. We're going to be discussing with a number of other experts and trying to find out what's going on. We've got another story. We're covering the government's announcement of the appointment of William Shawcross as the independent, quote unquote, independent reviewer to the prevent strategy, which has been strongly denounced by Muslim groups and representatives. So we're going to be finding out what's going on there. And a couple of other stories in the second hour of the show. Peterborough Mosque applied to allow to the local council to allow it to broadcast the azan in Peterborough. That got rejected. So we're going to be asking the question why. Last but not least, a quick update from Sri Lanka as the Sri Lankan government rejects the United Nations demand to stop forced COVID cremations. So quite a few stories coming up for you. Don't go away and do get involved. Right, let's go straight on to our leading story. Now, this is an incredible story. I'm telling you, it's absolutely incredible. If you are tuned in and you think that you've misheard the figures that I've just quoted earlier, then let me reassure you, I haven't, right? And you haven't misheard. The fat cats of the West have just got a lot fatter with a whopping 400 billion added to their bank accounts. I mean, the 10 richest people, including Amazon founder, Tesla founder, Facebook founder. I mean, when we speak to Max Lawson, the Oxfam International Head of Inequality Policy, I'm sure he can equate that. But that is enough money to, provide vaccination for every single person in the world, right, in terms of the coronavirus. And I'm sure it's plenty more, money than, that is needed to eradicate poverty, educate the uneducated, provide healthcare, and all the other lists of things that we could potentially identify that all of that wealth could actually cover. Oxfam estimates that as many as 500 million, right? 500 million more people were living in poverty as a result of the pandemic. I mean, that's just crazy stuff, isn't it? Absolutely crazy stuff. But let me stop talking. Let's get some experts into the conversation and find out, right, how do we reconcile these statistics, right? So now, if I'm correct, right, I've got Dr. Paul Segal. Hopefully, I'm saying the surname correctly, and if I'm not, please do confirm when we speak. Now, Dr. Paul is great to have. Dr. Paul, fantastic. Senior lecturer in economics at King's College London. I mean, I could spend a lot more longer giving you his background, but economic researcher of global inequality and poverty, and also a visiting research fellow at the London School of Economics. Just the kind of expert that I need to be speaking to. Paul, welcome to the show, and thank you very much for joining us on Friday Night Live.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Great having you. I mean, I'm hoping you're going to clarify what on earth is going on over here, because I mean, these statistics that, it's not only Oxfam that have issued a report recently, but I was reading a report from UBS, right? The investment bank found that billionaires increased their wealth by more than a quarter, 27.5%, but 40%, or whether it's 27%. On the other side of the spectrum, you've got these 500 million, right, more people living in poverty. Help us to explain what's going on here.
Well, as we all know, those with enormous wealth are extremely good at holding on to that wealth and ensuring that it can weather the storms that come, whereas normal people around the world, and particularly the poorest people around the world, find it very hard to recover from major shocks like the COVID crisis. And so, as with any major shock that hits everyone, we'd expect it to have a disproportionately large effect on the poor, because they just don't have the mechanisms to maintain their income sources, and they typically often don't have any wealth at all to smooth them through these crises.
Right. So Dr. Paul, I've got a lot of questions that I want to fire at you. So just bear with me whilst I start firing these questions. Okay. I get that they've got a lot more resources to weather the storm through, whilst the poor and the average haven't. But it's not exactly a level playing field, is it? To be honest with you.
It certainly isn't a level playing field. I mean, you have to think about how most people around the world have been hit by COVID. It's meant school closures, of course, that's a big deal in many countries around the world. And that's had a huge impact on children's education today, and will have a longer term impact on inequality in the future. And that's particularly because, I mean, we see inequality at every level. Poorer children, and this is true of many countries around the world, as World Bank research has shown, poorer children are less likely to get any kind of educational experience when their school closes, whereas richer children are able to get some kind of support from their parents or from someone who can support them. So we know that children get hit harder by this kind of crisis and by these school closures. And also, not just school closures, but of course, directly on people's work lives. Many people are suddenly unable to go to work because of COVID. And again, research has found that in many countries, it's the lower educated and lower paid workers who typically find it harder to keep working. And if you look in our country, in the UK, of course, it's people, the kind of professional workers are more likely to be able to work at home, and they don't have to stop working. And people who have to go and be somewhere in person to do their job, typically less professional skill-based work, those jobs often get closed down, and they don't have stable contracts, and they just lose their job. So at every level, we see the more disadvantaged people being hit harder by this crisis than people who are already more comfortable in their economic situation.
All right, so it's not a level playing field by any stretch of the imagination, right? And it's not even the first time that the billionaires gain, at the loss of others, right? Okay, based upon your expertise, what do you pin it down to? I mean, I've seen research, I've seen articles, right, pointing towards the government's disproportionate more aid, right, to larger companies, for example, right. We know wealth-friendly tax laws, loopholes, right, that just keep those billionaires at the top, interest it plays a huge role in the Western economics, because the billionaires can simply just keep their, all that capital in the bank account and just allow it to just multiply. Even when we talk about weathering the storm, I mean, they don't need to do much in terms of keeping the wealth in the bank accounts. It's just adding a cumulative and compound interest, isn't it? I mean, number of those factors. What do you think? Let's get the expertise or experts' view on those.
So I guess it depends on which fortune you're talking about. I mean, so Amazon is a very clear one, right? Amazon's had huge business because we're all stuck at home. We can't go to the shops. Instead, we just order in stuff online.
Yeah.
And so Jeff Bezos has seen his fortune grow for that reason. And also, as you said, the governments around the world have tended to offer the support they can to bigger companies and much less so to the individual workers. I mean, there have been furlough schemes and so on. I mean, a lot of governments have made some attempts, with varying amounts of success, but they're just not as protected as the billionaires, effectively.
Right, and why do you think that is? Is it the case that it's the return on investments of those multinationals and those those funds that go into these election campaigns, and we all know millions that are spent on election campaigns, and then look at Biden and look at his new team that have come into office. They're all comprised of those multimillionaires and billionaires. So it's only inevitable, but that policy and bailouts will always favor them, and and it'll be very, very considerably disproportionate to the average people, because the average people are suffering, aren't they? And it's not quite the same benevolence that's been bestowed upon the average person.
That's right, and a lot of these big fortunes, we have to bear in mind, are driven on the basis of basically monopolistic positions that these companies have in a particular market. So Amazon has a extremely strong market dominating position. Same as Facebook, Google, a lot of the new online companies, and those are semi-monopolistic positions that are allowed by governments. Governments don't need to allow that. They're protected by intellectual property rights that give them that dominant position. And so they can basically, and then when you get a shock like the COVID shock, it's the less well protected firms that tend to get hit harder. And so, I mean, I'm speculating now, but I might imagine when those less well protected, the smaller firms, the more vulnerable firms face those kinds of problems, then that might even give some extra boost to the primary monopolistic players, because they've got even less competition than before.
All right. So we were expecting actually another guest, Max Lawson, who's the Oxfam International Head of Inequality Policy. We can't quite seem to connect with Max at the moment, but I'm really honored to have your staff, Dr. Paul, to continue this conversation. I mean, I've got a couple of questions. There are commentators that point their fingers towards capitalism. I mean, Luke Hilliard, executive director of the High Pay Center, right? He talks about the destructive nature of the gap, right? The ugly phenomena, he calls it, from a moral perspective, but it's also economically and socially destructive, right? Those are the words that he uses, and then there's a lot of talk about a threat of a global uprising against the super rich, capitalism. Right. I mean, what's your take on such kind of predictions and doom and gloom kind of comments? Right. Do you think do you see this as a failure of capitalism, or in fact a success, and indeed the DNA of capitalism to produce these kind of disparities?
So that's a great and very big question. So it's definitely a feature of capitalism that is going to create high levels of inequality. That is part of the DNA of capitalism. But we do know there's lots of things you can do within a broadly capitalist system to keep inequality at reasonable levels. So there are plenty of capitalist countries which don't have excessively high levels of inequality. I mean, we look at the Scandinavian countries like Sweden or Denmark, which have very strong welfare states. They have very strong public services. They have high rates of taxation. These are countries which the economies are primarily capitalist, but they have strong state intervention, government intervention to ensure that the kind of the productivity gains that capitalism gives us, because capitalism is great at producing stuff, at getting people to produce efficiently. You know, you need those the government systems, the welfare states, the public services to help redistribute that. And in our country, possibly the greatest success of our economy and society is the NHS. And the NHS, let's be completely blunt, that's a socialist system.
Yeah.
It's a socialist healthcare system within a broadly capitalist country.
Yeah.
And if you look at, we've had lots of failures in dealing with COVID from this government. They've been all sorts of terrible decisions they've made. The one thing that's been extremely impressive, that's worked extremely well, is the rollout of the vaccination program. We're one of the world leaders in that. And the reason for that, above all, is because of the NHS. Yeah. Whereas with so many of the COVID policies, the government privatized them and sent them off to, in many cases, their personal friends with millions or billions of pounds to underperform, like the test and trace, like a lot of the PPE procurement and so on. Yeah. Those privatized elements worked very badly, but now that the NHS is in control of vaccinations, we're doing great. That's the one thing that's really working well.
So, Dr. Paul, a last question before I move on to Max Lawson, who has kindly now joined us. Let's talk about taxation, right? I'm going to be putting this question to Max very, very shortly. But this is not a new phenomenon. It's not a new report. It's not a new headline that we've seen in terms of the gap and the billionaires becoming even fatter billionaires. It's been happening for a long time. And every time I hear and I read more taxation for the super rich, but it really never happens. Do you really believe that, the governments are ever going to tax more the super rich?
So the big question here is about wealth taxation, right? So we already have income taxation. It taxes rich people more. It's not enough, but it's, has its effect. What we lack is a taxation of wealth. And that's what, there's a lot of movement globally. A lot of economists are working on this. And I think there's rising popularity of this idea. And I'm pretty hopeful that we might be moving towards some kind of consensus that we need some kind of wealth tax in the near future.
All right. Fantastic. Dr. Paul Siegel, thank you very much for joining us this evening on Friday Night Live. Okay, listeners, that was Dr. Paul. Right. I'm hoping we've got Max Lawson. Hi, Max.
Hi.
Fantastic. Great to have you on Friday Night Live. Oxfam International Head of Inequality Policy. Have I got that correct?
That's me. Yep.
Right. Fantastic. Great to have you with us. It's really good to be talking about this subject matter because, of course, it just caught my attention and I had to cover this. But you know what? I'll tell you, it's not the first time that I've covered the huge gap between the rich and the people who have and the people who don't have. It's not the first time that I've covered, and it's not going to be the last time in terms of the gaps just getting ridiculously bigger, right? And the figures are just getting ridiculously absurd, right? If I asked you, you could probably equate that and tell me that's enough money, for every single person in the world to be vaccinated, eradicate poverty, educate, and provide water, and the list continues. We're producing reports after reports. Are we actually seeing any action being taken there, Max?
I know the feeling. I've been the author of many of those reports over the years, and we fighting a hard battle here, and I think COVID has made it, certainly in the short run, has made things significantly worse. I think your COVID hit a world that was already very unequal, and I think it's supercharging that inequality. Partly, you're seeing this kind of very rapid. Billionaires lost a lot of money at the beginning of the crisis, like March last year when the stock markets tanked, and so you saw the rich get a lot less rich, but only it was super temporary, and they made all that money back and more in a few months. Whilst ordinary people, and by that I don't mean the poorest of the poor, I mean basically anyone in the bottom, like 85-90%, has faced hardship because of this crisis. So it's not just about the rich and the poor; it's about the rich and the rest. I think that's the key learning point of the last year. So I think, I suppose, in a roundabout way, your question is like, can we ever be hopeful? I think, we wouldn't be campaigners if we have to stay positive. even in these dark days. But you know, Argentina just agreed to, building on Paul's point earlier, Argentina just passed a wealth tax to pay for the COVID recovery.
Right.
Bolivia are thinking of doing one, and there was a commission here in the UK that looked at how much we'd raise. I mean, obviously Boris Johnson is unlikely to do it, but
Yeah.
you know, so
Real concrete. It's about real concrete action, isn't it, Max? I mean, you're right. I was going to ask you about your feelings. I mean, being the author of a number of these reports, I mean, we'll come on to what is it that you're seeing actually change, over the years, right? Are we having some impact? But my ultimate question to you, or initial question to you rather, is the fact that, I mean, a lot of this money that is generated, I mean, how much of it is actually being pumped back into social services, back into the NHS, right? Back into trying to solve some of these huge problems that we're actually also creating at the same time, right? And I know, sometimes you read headlines that millions have been donated, but it's almost like a drop in the ocean, isn't it, in comparison with what they're actually making?
It is, and a lot of it is very, quite rightly, people get confused. I know people remember that when we had the expenses scandal with MPs, and it came hot on the heels of the financial crisis. And in the financial crisis, you saw tens of billions, trillions of dollars going missing and being stolen by crooked bankers. But people didn't, the zeros were so big, you just kind of gloss over. Whereas when an MP was caught, with £1,000 or something like that, people get that, So I think it's really important to understand the sheer scale of what we're talking about. So, I mean, I find a really one good way of juxtaposing a million and a billion. People think, oh, what's the difference between a billionaire and a millionaire? Yeah. If you were to sit down now and start counting dollar bills up to $1 million, there was a guy who did this once for charity. He did it for 16 hours a day. With just kind of toilet breaks and food breaks, but 16 hours non-stop. It took him 69 days to count to $1 million. If you tried to do that for $1 billion, it would take you 244 years. Wow. So, the scale of just $1 billion. And then you look at Jeff Bezos and he's got $200 billion, So, I mean, it becomes an insane number. And as you say,
absolutely. I mean, is the insanity, I mean, of it all is that, I mean, what can you do with all of that money? I mean, even if you live a super luxury life, it's impossible, almost impossible, to actually dispose of all that wealth. But on the other hand, there are plenty of, avenues that you could actually very, very meaningfully dispose of that wealth. I mean, for example, you gave the example in your own report that the increase in the wealth would be more than enough to pay for a COVID-19 vaccine for all, right?
Which is absolutely
41 billion, right? And if I asked you for a list of other things that that they could help, right, eradicate, a lot of the problems that the world suffers from today could well be eradicated if they decided to actually donate some of that money to address those causes.
Yeah, no, it really could be. I mean, the world is constantly making choices about where we put our wealth and where we put our money. And I draw optimism and hope from the past. People, often ask as a kind of quiz question, which country had the highest rate of taxation on the super rich in the last 50 years? And it was the US. They had the top rate of tax in 1980 was 92%. So. Wow. And that was true from the Second World War all the way through to 1980. You had the super rich paying a top rate of tax of 90, 92, 93%.
Right.
So it's not mad to have a functioning capitalist economy that you still have rich people. Yeah. People still have got enough money to go out and buy a nice big house, but they pay reasonable rates of tax. So I think we could get back there. Why not?
So, Max, I've got about 30, 45 seconds remaining. What is Oxfam in this report seeking from the super rich and the governments? What's the kind of, pressure that we're putting on, and what are we asking?
I think we need to see people learn from the last year and that we need a lot less billionaires and a lot more nurses in our world, and we need to invest in reducing inequality, not increasing it. So that does mean tax, it means higher pay for workers, it means treating the people who actually matter in our society, like nurses, like teachers, like bin men, much better, and not caring so much about billionaires and hedge funds.
Right, Max, thank you very much for joining us this evening on Friday Night Live. Unfortunately,
No problem.
we ran out of time. Thank you very much. Great to have you with us.
Cheers.
Thanks. Right, listeners, that was Max Lawson, Oxford International Head of Inequality Policy. And before that, we had Dr. Paul Siegel, Senior Lecturer in Economics at King's College London. I want to hear the thoughts of my listeners. I want to hear, what do you think? Is capitalism capable of solving this problem? Insane amount of money that is being made by the world billionaires. Millions go completely dependent on food banks around the world, unemployed, out of jobs. What's going on? We're going into a commercial break. When we come back, we'll be discussing the latest story. Don't go away.
Assalamu alaikum. In Luton and its surrounding areas, it is now time for Salat al-Isha.
लुटन और इसके मज़ाफ़ात में नमाज इशा का वक्त हुआ चाहता है.
This azan has been sponsored by Ideal Properties. Contact us on 01582 721110 or log on to www.idealpropertiesltd.co.uk.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته.
Would you like to sponsor the Azan? If so, give us a call on 01582 481 810 or email us on info@inspirefm.org.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 6:30.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. It is Friday the 29th of January 2021. And I am your host, Hafiz Shab'an. This evening, inshallah ta'ala, welcome back. First half an hour of the show, we were discussing an incredible report by Oxfam and a number of other institutions which are suggesting an incredible rise in the number of billionaires and the wealth of the world's 10 richest men, whilst the world's average people, the average person around the world suffers, right? The average person, according to Oxfam, estimates that nearly as 500 million more people are living in poverty as a result of the pandemic. Incredible stuff. But anyway, we are gonna be covering a number of the stories over the next hour of the show. We have got for you government appointment of William Shawcross as independent review to the prevent strategy, strongly denounced by Muslim groups and representatives. We're going to be covering that later. And we've also got an update from the situation in Sri Lanka. So we're going to get an update on what's been happening in Sri Lanka. And this, of course, you will remember with regards to the government forcing COVID victims who pass away, including the Muslim, for their bodies to be cremated. And there was the action that was being taken via the United Nations to try to stop the Sri Lankan government from doing that. But before we go into those stories, we're going to be playing an interview and a story from last week with regards to the story of Dr. Professor Luqman and the arrest of him and his son by the Qatari authorities in an undisclosed location in Qatar for almost 6 months. And we'll be back straight after that. Until then, over to the interview from last week. I was actually browsing KJ's website when I saw these headlines, and subhanAllah, Australian professor and son released from secret jail in Qatar. Now, what struck me about this story was the picture of the professor. Now, this Australian professor, Professor Luqman, is someone that I knew in 2007 when I was actually out in Kuwait working in Kuwait. I met this family, and I met his sons, and I met his, extended family, and spent, almost a year with this brother. And he was such a lovely professional brother, a very, very senior brother in the community, a very respected brother in the community. Being a professor at university, at one point actually a dean of his department. Then he actually went and moved on in terms of his job, went to Qatar with his family. I remember speaking to him. I visited his family in Sri Lanka during my work travels out in Sri Lanka. And that's the last I heard of him. And then suddenly this week, I was browsing the Cage website, and lo and behold, I see the headlines that the Australian professor and his son have been taken into custody in a secret cell or secret location, secret jail within Qatar, and held without charge for almost 6 months and allegedly tortured. I mean, it was such an emotional story to read that, because this individual that I've known in 2007 was an incredible human being, incredible family, very, very hospitable people. And those are the experiences that I remember of this particular brother. Let's speak to Cage. Let's speak to the head of casework at Cage, Sister Naila Ahmed, who's been covering this story, inshallah ta'ala. And let's get some background, let's get some further information, let's find out what's been happening. Of course, unfortunately, subhanAllah, I'm 6 months too late. 6 months too late, because when I actually saw the headlines, I thought the brother was still under detention, and then I saw the further news stories and realized, or I believe that the brother was then released, and alhamdulillah has arrived in Turkey. Sister Naila, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So Sister Naila, welcome to Friday Night Live. You probably just heard my introduction to the story. Give us an update in terms of, I mean, for me, it's so unfortunate. I'm 6 months late, and the brother's already out, and I almost feel, that I let the brother down. I wasn't able to get involved. I wasn't able to raise media attention. I wasn't able to support, and it goes to show how important the work of Cage is in highlighting such stories. But give us a bit of background in terms of when this came to light for yourself as Cage, and how long you've been working on this case, and any more background that you can give us. Right? It seems. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Sorry, I don't know if the connection's a bit bad. I'll try my best, inshallah.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear now.
Alhamdulillah. So yeah, obviously the family came to us. It's actually the first time it happened was in July. So Dr. Luqman and his son Ismail were arrested at that time. Obviously, thinking that there's no real allegations here, there's no charges. The family didn't think that it would even reach as long as it did. They thought, oh, this is all a big misunderstanding. Unfortunately, even after the Australian embassy were involved, there was no real change, and their condition was worsening. Dr. Luqman's health was worsening, and it was at that point that the family were aware of Cage, and through some contacts that we know, they reached out to us. It was end of November or early December. So from that point onwards is when we sort of started supporting on the case, and almost immediately it was quite clear that every other avenue had been explored, in terms of communications within Qatar, communications with the embassy, the Australian embassy, because of course they're Australian nationals, and nothing was shifting. And so we thought the next, appropriate step is public advocacy and media. And of course, like yourself and others who knew him, they were just, it's so shocking to see, what has happened to him. And of course, there are now also long-term effects in terms of their health, from the torture that they had to endure. And we do feel that the media campaign and the publicity around it did help contribute towards them being released, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, it just goes to show the importance of the work that Cage, mashallah, does. And we're really appreciative of that. You said that the family came to you in November or December, but of course he was arrested in July, and then of course through the months of August and September, you can imagine that they were trying to exhaust all the avenues that were available to them and open to them before they actually approached yourself. So take us through that journey. I mean, because there's a lot of questions that are raised here, aren't there? I mean, being an Australian citizen, and sometimes we live in this kind of a mirage that I'm a British citizen, I'm living out in Kuwait, and I've lived out in that region for 7 years, 8 years. But we know these countries are literally almost police states, because you can't have a conscience. You have to live without a conscience, and if you have a conscience and you say something, then you might well end up in a similar situation. And I know Professor Luqman, and I know he was a person who was an exceptional individual, but also motivated by what was happening around the world. But tell us more about the background when the family approached yourself, the avenues that they had exhausted, and in particular, I'm interested in this mirage who wakes up a lot of people that being a British or an American or an Australian or a Western citizen doesn't actually afford you any additional rights, and in a lot of cases, these countries turn out to be as complicit as the originator country.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's multiple questions that need to be asked here. The role of Qatar can't be understated. They were the ones who picked him up. Eventually his job was stripped from him because he was in detention. His right to remain in the country, they were torturing him all this time. And so Qatar do have answers. Answers to give in terms of what they were doing and what their role was. But we're also aware of other states and other state involvement. One of them being the US, and we do there are serious questions that need to be asked here. 3 months into the detention of Dr. Luqman, his son, who's based in Australia, the US announced US financial sanctions against him. Now, obviously, given the timeline and given that now we are actually aware that some of the interrogations were about his son in Australia, to him and some of the other men that were detained, there's a strong indication that suggests that, was this done at the behest of the US? And why is Qatar, doing their dirty work? Of course, we also know that Qatar hosts one of the largest military bases in the Middle East for the United States. So they do have a role to play. Although, of course, by and large, you see them as quite a good country, and I'm sure a lot of Muslims live there quite happily. But at the same time, it's a lot more complex, and it's not so straightforward that this is a good country, this is a bad country. But yeah, definitely there are questions to be asked. Furthermore, Australia as a state, since the release and since we've been able to have more communication, we've been made aware that actually Australia knew of their detention as early as the day after he was arrested.
So let's Australia and it's implicit, some of these other countries that are complicit, and let's just focus on Qatar. I mean, it wouldn't be of any surprise that Qatar was actually instructed, right, to pick up Professor Luqman. I mean, Professor Luqman has been living in Kuwait for years. But before I went in 2007, he'd been there for a number of years, well established. He was in Qatar for such a long time, such a respected, like I said, dean of his department. Won notable awards, right? Well recognized as a professional in the community. So for this to happen all of a sudden, without the behest of a foreign power, would be very, very surprising. Is there any evidence to suggest what prompted the picking up of Professor Luqman at all in your research so far?
Not at all. And this is kind of the family do still want answers. What happened? Why were they picked up? What were the alleged charges? There were no charges. So what were the allegations? There were no allegations. It was all very all done very secretively. Actually, the family actually weren't in touch for a good 37 days. They were held incommunicado, so they had no idea what had happened to them. They had no idea if the state even had them. When they were in communication with the state denied taking them. They said they're not in our care or in our custody. So those things are still unanswered, and I think the family will be pursuing that further, inshallah.
Absolutely. I mean, subhanallah, from a lot of the other case studies that Cage gets involved in, and some of the sort of stories that we generally hear, subhanAllah, the fact that he's been released after 5 to 6 months, alhamdulillah, is a huge sigh of relief and a huge blessing, because that, I mean, generally you see that people that get picked up like that, unfortunately, stay a lot longer, before you do get, any form of communication, never mind release. So alhamdulillah, that has actually come about. Do you think, I mean, that was at the behest of the kind of public opinion that was raised, public media attention that was being brought upon the case from the likes of Cage and any other organizations? What were the family were the family involved through any other third party in raising that public opinion? What was the family? What were the other avenues that the family have been pursuing?
So they were pursuing, conversations within Qatar with organizations on the ground and officials as well, trying to understand why they're being detained and what their concerns are, which they came back with nothing basically. The Australian embassy were involved from October, and they didn't really raise any of the torture concerns. They didn't take any of the torture concerns seriously. We have now been made aware that they visited them only once in November at the secret detention site. So the Australians knew exactly where they were being detained, but they didn't inform the family of this location, which, they were held, I think, in 2 different sites for 5 months. It was in secret detention. And Australia's complicity here is very shocking. And, these things will be pursued, but it's something for us as the public as well to raise these questions,
Right.
And the public campaign, I do think that was the a turning point. Of course, we never know. We never can say for certain that, this resulted in that. And then, but we can say, the timeline, I think the story was made public around mid-December, and then they were released from custody and released from secret detention into the deportation center a week and a half or 2 weeks later. So yeah, we can definitely say that it played a role in that, inshallah. And of course, it's all Allah. In the end of the day, our actions. Allah wants us to see action and to do things, but at the same time, it's all in His hands. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So, Naila, of course, you're in touch with the family, inshallah, and do communicate our regards and our thoughts and our prayers for Dr. Luqman and family, inshallah. But I mean, of course, the latest report was that they've arrived in Turkey and receiving urgent medical attention. I mean, I read on one of the stories that Professor Luqman had almost lost 25 kgs in body weight. I mean, subhanAllah, incredible stuff. And of course, they'll probably be in Turkey for a while until his health condition stabilizes and they're able to make this long journey back to Australia. It might be a bit premature of me asking, but what are the next steps? Because of course, a lot of unanswered questions. 6 months without, of arrests, detention, without any charges. Australian embassy being involved from second day and not really providing any real assistance. And quite frankly, a lot of these governments, I don't want to make allegations here, end up to be complicit in a lot of these crimes. There's a long, and I know Professor Luqman's family are fighters, are campaigners, right? So there's gonna be a long road ahead to campaign to get some justice, to get some answers, and put some of these, governments in the dock, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, I think the present sort of concern is Dr. Luqman's health and the health of the other men who are also detained with him. Of course, with torture, there are physical effects, but there are also psychological effects, and that is the top priority before anything. But yeah, obviously, without going into too much detail, of course, these things need to be discussed and decided still. But I'm sure that the family will be pursuing all legal avenues open to them, inshallah.
Yeah. And is there any news? I presume it's been a couple of weeks now, inshallah, if not longer, since Professor Luqman was released and he's in in Turkey. Any update with regards to the health of Dr. Luqman?
No real update yet. He's still seeking medical attention, or trying to seek medical attention in Turkey. So there's not much more we can go into at this point. But inshallah, if there are any updates, we'll be updating on our social media platforms and on our website as well. So cage.ngo. If you check there, inshallah, and on our Facebook and Instagram, inshallah. If you follow us, we will be providing updates in due course, inshallah.
Sure. Dr. Luqman is one brother, unfortunately, that has gone through this experience, and subhanAllah, there's so many more. I mean, another name that comes to mind is Naveed Butt, and I don't know if Cage is involved at all with the case of Naveed Butt from Pakistan, that one of these individuals that has been missing for I think 6 or 7 years. I think 6 years. But I mean. The list of such brothers, unfortunately, and the cases that probably are coming to Cage, you're probably been inundated, because this is the current climate that we're living through. Just take us through, the current kind of workload and cases and the kind of demand on your services that you're kind of experiencing, Sister Naila.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you think of torture and all of these things, and you think of Guantanamo, and you think of the early years, back in 2001 and maybe 2003. And unfortunately, we are still seeing it to this day. There are British citizens that it's happening to abroad, and other citizens, like you've mentioned, Brother Naveed. I mean, this is an unfortunate reality of the world that we're living in, and the effects of the war on terror. It is continuing. But it doesn't, our cases don't just sort of, they're not always at that end of the spectrum, which is the worst end, really, when you think of torture. But of course, there are people who are stopped at airports every single day. We get calls from people all the time, stops under Schedule 7, MI5 harassment. So, security services trying to, get information from the Muslim community or get them to inform on the community. You have prevent referrals. So I'm sure you've mentioned prevent on your program before. It's a duty on public officials to refer or to at least have due regard to this legal obligation. Unfortunately, we do get a lot of these types of cases. Families unsure of what their rights are. Even police doorstepping. And I think in lockdown, that's been one thing that we've definitely seen an increase of. Or police just turning up at somebody's door and just saying, "Oh, we want to have a chat." And of course, you don't have to speak to them. You're not under arrest. You're under no obligation. And if you do speak to them, you should do so with a lawyer. And that's your right. It's your right to speak to them. But of course, they'll try and make you feel like you can't. So yeah, there's a whole array of different types of cases that we deal with. And unfortunately, being in lockdown or being in the midst of a pandemic hasn't necessarily slowed them down at all. We've seen in some ways they've amped things up, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, when I read this story, and the question from one of our listeners who's asking, what about his son, Ismail Talib, and not only Ismail, but then also his brother, and the son of Dr. Luqman, Ahmed Luqman, in the States was also, or in Australia was also then, I don't know, interrogated, questioned, or arrested, right? But I believe his son Ismail was also released. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, alhamdulillah. There were him and a few other men that were also detained. They've been released, alhamdulillah.
And subhanAllah, one of the listeners is asking this question. I mean, I know the sons and even the daughter Maryam and Ismail. I knew them in 2007. They were very, very young kids then. Just small kids running around. And subhanAllah, as I said, a lovely family and lovely children, mashallah. And, would make any parent be proud of having children like that. It's just incredible, the kind of world that we're living in, without any allegations being just picked up and put into, incarceration for 6+ months. Subhanallah. And the last quick question with regards to, I mentioned the case of Naveed, but is that a case that has come to Cage at all? Sister Naila, are you aware of that case?
We are, yeah.
Sorry?
We are aware of the case, yeah. I mean, it is unfortunate. There are again, it's one of those things that often a lot of avenues are explored, and I know there have been many sort of pleas for his release over the years, or even just his location. But yeah, I mean, it is something that we are aware of.
And is it really, I guess it's obvious that it's probably some countries that are a bit more receptive to responding when it's public pressure and media attention is upon them. I mean, other countries couldn't give any care whether there's media attention or not. Egypt being one of them, perhaps, but it has succumbed to some pressure in some instances. What about Pakistan as a country, which is also quite notorious for these kind of political figures going missing? But how is Pakistan with regards to when political pressure, media attention is put on Pakistan to take action? For example, in the case of Naveed, but are you getting any response? Are you getting any people of conscience that are willing to put up a struggle and represent such causes within Pakistan?
I mean, I think it's very difficult, and of course we're a UK-based organization, but sometimes people contact us from all over the world, and what we can do and what we can't do is sometimes based on that and based on our capability. In Pakistan, I'm sure there must be movements or there must be groups on the ground trying to fight and raise awareness. I'm not, personally aware in terms of what would be the pressure point for Pakistan and what would be the, I don't know if they succumb to public pressure. Maybe with the new government, there may be a bit of a shift, but they've also, again, they've got their interests, whatever their interests are as a state, that will take priority over everything else. So yeah, I'm not too sure on that one. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Sister Nana, Jazakallah khair for joining us this evening and giving us a very, very valuable update. I think for our listeners who are not probably aware of this particularly individual, this brother, I think the lesson to take away is that anyone is prone to, susceptible to, being in a similar situation to Brother Luqman and how he has gone through this experience. And we all need to be aware of the current political legislation that is being used. I mean, in Britain, very intelligently, very cleverly. In France, very frankly and openly. And in some of the GCC countries where, as you were saying earlier, Sister Naila, you can go out there, you live there, and you think, wow, what a comfortable and an easy place to live in, all the luxuries and the conveniences of life. But then you have these dark realities that you also have to face up to. Very, very quickly, if you can, inshallah ta'ala, do communicate and pass on my regards to the family, and we will make this video available, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll
just to add on that, if I can, for the community who are listening, inshallah, just to highlight the importance of our obligation as Muslims to the prisoners and to those who've been separated from their families. Sometimes there isn't much we can do but make dua, but then sometimes there's articles that are going up there, share it, show your support in whatever way you can, and there's always something that we can do. So inshallah, that's an obligation on us all as a community, and of course Cage are trying to fulfill some of that, but of course we always need your support as well, inshallah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We have now Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Right, listeners, that was Sister Nana from Cage giving us some valuable update with regards to the case of Professor Luqman and his family that were arrested, put into prison in a secret location within the Qatar, and then subsequently released 6 months later without any charges. SubhanAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give reward and patience and a full recovery to Professor Luqman and family.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM. Inspire.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: ليس شيء أكرم على الله من الدعاء. That there is nothing more honored in the sight of Allah than supplication.
It's a new year, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for a financial workout. Let's sweat those pounds, powerlift those pennies, and get fiscally fit. From managing debt to everyday budgeting, HSBC's new online financial fitness hub gives you the tools you need to help work that money. Search HSBC UK Financial Fitness. HSBC UK. Together we thrive.
Attention for landlords. क्या आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी जल्द से जल्द किराए पर लग जाए और आपकी प्रॉपर्टी की 100% देखभाल के साथ साथ किराया भी पर वक्त मिले? तो मैरीगोल्ड रेजिडेंशियल से राब्ता कीजिए। मैरीगोल्ड रेजिडेंशियल अब प्रॉपर्टी की खरीदो फरोख्त का काम भी करते हैं। अगर आप अपनी प्रॉपर्टी रेंट पर खरीदना या बेचना चाहते हैं तो आज ही फोन कीजिए 01582 617 617 251 Dunstable Road, Luton. Terms and conditions apply.
AK Windows South Limited, manufacturers and installers of high-quality UPVC windows and doors, bifold doors, composite doors, conservatories, porches, skypods, fascias, guttering, and much, much more. We specialize in double glazing and triple glazing using the best German profile. If you want quality at affordable prices, AK Windows is the place to go. If your house needs a facelift, you know who to trust. For a free quote, call AK Windows today on 01582 483 777 or visit us at Unit 10E, Britannia Estate, Leagrave Road, Luton.
TheStudyCentre.co.uk is Luton's newest tuition centre and flexi school, providing hundreds of structured courses from Key Stage 1 to GCSEs. Subjects include English, Maths, Science, Islamic Arts, Quran, Arabic, Islamic Studies, plus many more. Classes are taught in person or online, daytime or evenings, weekdays and weekends from as little as £6 an hour. Register now at thestudycentre.co.uk and let's get learning.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another. And help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. The NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
इत्दाल, हुर्रियत और हक की आवाज़ हमेशा गालिब रही है और यही आवाज़ हमेशा गालिब रहेगी। आइए और सुनिए हक की आवाज़। मैं हूँ इमाम हाफिज एजाज अमन, सुनाऊंगा आपको प्रोग्राम आवाज़ाए हक में हक की आवाज़, हर सोमवार 11 बजे से 12 बजे तक, ओनली ऑन इंस्पायर FM 105.1।
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7 o'clock.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live. It is me, Hafiz Shab'an. It is Friday the 29th of January 2021. We are broadcasting live to Luton on 105.1 FM and across our sister partner stations, including Sheffield Link FM, Peterborough Salam, Derby, Nottingham, Fazar. Assalamu alaikum to all our listeners there. And also, don't forget, we are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, and do remember to like us, like tonight's show, and leave us your comments, inshallah. Most importantly, let's get your opinions, let's get your thoughts, and let's get your comments on the show tonight. 01582 481 822 01582 481 822 07779 07779 481 822 07779 481 822 is the number for your social media messages, right? So I'm looking at the screen, which shows me my WhatsApp and SMS messages. I can't see any for me so far, so do please get in touch. Let us know your thoughts with regards to tonight's show. So we are in the second hour of the show tonight. So it's time to very quickly move on to our next story. Mashallah, our guest for the next story has already joined us. Next story is an interesting one. I saw recently that the government has appointed, right, William Shawcross as the so-called independent reviewer to the Prevent strategy. Now, not surprisingly, it's been denounced by Muslim groups and Muslim representatives. I was just looking at one of the Muslim organization websites press releases, latest news. Shawcross's appointment must lead to boycott of sham review, reads Cage, right? And the Cage managing director, Muhammad Rabbani, said Shawcross's appointment demonstrates that government has given up on even pretending that it cares about integrity in public office. I wonder why it's saying that. But anyway, it will come to light very, very soon when we go back to our main guest, inshallah. We're going to be speaking to Muhammad Musa from Islam 21C and find out why this is causing so much anxiety and so much opposition from Muslim circles. Let's go straight to Brother Muhammad Musa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, akhi.
Alaikum salam. It's good to have you, Hafiz.
Alhamdulillah, nice to have you, Brother Muhammad Musa, on Friday Night Live, mashallah. Right, so tell us, government is pledging to do this, review of the Prevent strategy. We know Prevent strategy has been described, to use the best of words or the lightest of words, as a toxic policy. People have described it far worse than just being a toxic policy, right? And now it's appointed William Shawcross as an independent reviewer. What is the problem? Why is it being denounced by Muslim groups and representatives, Akhi?
Well, William Shawcross, he has a history of Islamophobia. In the past, he's made comments that have been quite negative towards Muslims. And he's been the director of a right-wing think tank called Henry Jackson Society. So the appointment of William Shawcross, it causes a lot of anxiety and worry amongst Muslim communities because they question the actual independence of Prevent, if that makes sense.
Right. So let me just get this right. Based upon what you're telling me, it sounds a bit unfair. Just because someone is critical of the Muslim community doesn't mean that they can't do they can't hold a professional, they can't hold a position in the professional sphere, and they can't lead a review, which, just because they've been critical of the Muslim community. Help me understand that, right? I get a concern if the same individual you're telling me has been on the chair, on the body of a far, or did you say a right-wing organization?
Yes, that's right.
Right. Okay. So your concern is not just the fact that he's critical of Muslims or the Muslim community in the past, but it's a bit more than that, isn't it? It's the fact that it's been actually on the body of an organization which is not. It doesn't keep it a secret. It's quite a right-wing, new conservative think tank. We're talking about the Henry Jackson Society here, right? So what does that make you feel like, brother Muhammad Musa, that if the government, okay, is already rolled out this strategy, not too long ago, many years ago, of course, the community has shown quite a strong opposition to this policy, is forced the government to reconsider it, and then it brings in this chap who, again, the community is completely opposed to.
Exactly.
What does that show you?
Well, it shows that the government does not have the best interests of the Muslim community in their minds. And you have an individual who has a history of Islamophobia and conflict with the Muslim community, and then for the government to appoint him as the independent reviewer, it's a slap in the face. I mean, Muslims in the UK, they've made long strides to be a part of the community, right? And then for the government to do this is quite insulting.
Right. So listeners, we're talking about the prevent strategy. I think our listeners are well familiar with the prevent strategy. We've covered it so many times. And also, I tell you what we're discussing. We're discussing the government's appointment of a chap by the name of William Shawcross. Now, I've got nothing against William Shawcross as an individual. I don't think Brother Muhammad Musa has got anything against him. But what actually creates some kind of anxiety and concern is when you hear that Mr. William Shawcross, as director of the Henry Jackson Society in 2012, was known to have stated that Europe and Islam is one of the greatest and most terrifying problems of our future. Interesting. I think all European countries have vastly, very quickly growing Islamic populations. Right. And we've also seen comments, and we've also seen Mr. Shawcross, his leadership of the Charity Commission, when he was accused of institutional racism against Muslim communities. Right, the commission also wrongfully accused Muslim charities of using donations to fund extremist groups. Right, so when you start adding all of these, stacking all of these, circumstantial evidences, if you want to call it, right, and all of these, all of this profile of this individual, of the past offices that he's held, right, then it doesn't actually amount to a very good, a piece of news item when he's the same chap who's being told now, hey, come and have a look at the prevent strategy, and the very same people that who you consider as a huge problem or one of the greatest problems, come and give us some advice with regards to how we should, rectify this prevent strategy, if that's the case, right?
That's right.
No, not very good. Not very good news reading. So what is it that Muhammad Musa that you're actually calling for, and what is it that you're suggesting?
Well, prevent strategy as a whole is it's a very institutionally racist and discriminatory program. Historically as well, they discriminate and target Muslims in a very erroneous way. So my recommendation would be to actually go into Muslim communities and engage in open dialogue with them, as opposed to discriminating against them and having these wrong stereotypes about them as well. I'm sure you know that 65% of referrals on Prevent are Muslims, yet only 5% of the population are Muslims in the UK. So this is quite wrong. and they target Muslims in a way that's really unfair. They look at normal signs of faith, as signs of extremism, which is quite wrong. And so I would say that go into these Muslim communities, talk to them, hear about their concerns, about the issues, as opposed to appointing Islamophobes to lead racist and discriminatory organization like Prevent.
Right. So the Home Secretary Priti Patel chose Shawcross over the former Chief Crown Prosecutor Nazir Afzal. Right.
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm reading here. Mr. Shawcross, right? So, Brother Muhammad Musa, we always believe in giving people a second chance, right? I mean, is there no way we can give this fella a second chance? I mean, he's saying here, I'm delighted to lead this important review to ensure that Britain has the most effective strategy possible for preventing people from becoming terrorists. And I look forward to assessing how Prevent works, what impact it has, and what further can be done to safeguard individuals from all forms of terrorist influence. I look forward to hearing from a wide range of voices, particularly those who have had experience of Prevent in practice. So it seems like he's all open for engagement with the Muslim community, Muhammad.
Well, yes, that's what he has to say. But when you talk about second chances, look at the history of Prevent and look at the history of William Shawcross. We know that Prevent is unfair and biased. And William Shawcross, as I've said before, he's said negative comments about Muslims. He has a history of Islamophobia. Not only was he the director of the Henry Jackson Society, he's also a member of the Policy Exchange, which is also another right-wing think tank. So talking about second chances, I think we already have facts and evidence of who these people are and what this organization is. And there is a lot at stake here at the moment right now in the UK, specifically with Muslims as well. And we have a government who's being led by an Islamophobe and who has ministers who are Islamophobes as well. So it's very important to know who these people are and what they represent.
All right, we got a statement from the Muslim Council of Britain. Let's go to this. It is ironic. Pardon me. It is ironic that a policy supposedly charged with preventing extremism is to be scrutinized by a person who holds hostile views on Islam and Muslims, right? Who has links to people with extreme views on us, and who defends the worst excesses of the so-called war on terror. A statement from the Muslim Council of Britain states, once again, the government is making it clear it has no interest in truly reviewing the policy. William Shawcross, according to the MCB, is unfit to be a neutral and fair assessor of this government policy, which has been criticized for unfairly targeting British Muslims, given his frightening views about Islam and the Muslims. Now, that actually, makes a lot of sense to me, what the MCB are raising as a valid concern. You know what, Brother Muhammad Musa? A lot of people are going to be listening to our show tonight, right? And they're going to be talking, and if they think anyway like the way I think, right? Here's a policy that the government has rolled out. It didn't really engage with grassroots Muslim community at all, grassroots Muslim organizations at all, right? It obviously engaged in a few selected Muslim individuals, right, who are obviously on the payroll of government direct or indirectly funded organizations, right? So it rolls it out, implements it for a number of years. The whole community pretty much is united against it. It realizes it's too toxic. It realizes it's not going to work. And then it pledges a revamp of it and brings in this guy who's associated with far-right extremism.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff. What people will be, thinking is that, is the government genuine at all? It's very disingenuous of this British government, isn't it, in the first place? And what gives you the confidence and the trust to say that the government's going to change its mind, Brother Muhammad?
Well, I don't have the confidence and the trust in the government. I mean, if you look at how Shawcross was appointed, as you mentioned, they have a few Muslim candidates. So last year in November, 1 week before the interview process for the independent reviewer, the Telegraph published an article saying that Shawcross was a favourite amongst the ministers. So it clearly shows that there was no transparency in this interview. There was no democratic process in electing a reviewer. So, I mean, you had one candidate, Nazir Afzal. He was a Muslim, former chief prosecutor as well, from the north in England, where many Muslim communities live. And he was not chosen. So that makes you question the trust, the transparency, and the true intentions of this government. So, I mean, after appointing Shawcross, I don't have any trust in the government. I never had trust before, but this just solidifies the distrust that I and many Muslims in the country have.
Yeah, I mean, brother Muhammad, I mean, I tell you where I'm going with this. I mean, a lot of people, ask that, we should petition the government and petition the MPs and petition, the political parties when it comes to a lot of international issues, when it comes to, Kashmir, or when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to, Rohingya, or whether it comes to the Uyghurs, etc., etc. And what we're actually saying is a lot closer to home, where it actually matters a lot more, because we're actually indigenous, living, we're citizens of this country, that the government doesn't actually, quite frankly, care about us, right? And even doesn't approach its own citizens in a very genuine way, in a sincere way, and that's what we're highlighting. So how can we?
And they don't also understand the issues that we, as Muslims, face in this country, as British Muslim citizens.
So do you think that's the fundamental problem with the system, this fundamental problem with the Conservatives as opposed to the Labour, or is it just a general horizontal problem across the political spectrum?
I do think it's a general issue that we face in political society, but more so within the Conservative Party. And when you look at Islamophobia within the Tory Party, it's rife with Islamophobia, 2 years ago, you had a number of Tory councillors, MPs and politicians making these Islamophobic comments and statements on Twitter, on Facebook, and nothing was done about it. They were given essentially a slap on the back, and that's it. No concrete or solid stances were taken against them. So specifically within the Conservative Party, there is a major issue of Islamophobia. And the leadership, Boris Johnson, the Home Secretary, they're not doing anywhere near enough to tackle these issues.
All right. So what if the government introduced someone like, I don't know, the notorious Majid Nawaz to come and lead the review? I mean, would you be happy that it's not Shawcross, but it's another Muslim doing the review of prevent strategy? Would that appease you?
It wouldn't, no.
So what? It's not the name then, is it?
It's not the name, no. It's the beliefs and it's the ideology that they have. I mean, Majid Nawaz, he's known to side with these right-wing think tanks, with the government, and essentially what the government puts out regarding Islamophobia and anything to do with Muslims in this country as well. So just like Shawcross, I would not trust him as well.
All right, and what about this whole question of review? I mean, look, genuinely, right? I was reading the press release from Cage. Let me go back to that press release, right? So Cage's policy, press release, January 26th, 2021, is very, very disciplined, principled. Shawcross's appointment must lead to boycott of sham review, right? So they're taking a very principled approach here, right? We call upon civil society to adopt our 8-point plan, which is endorsed by over 100 academics, campaigners, to move beyond this legacy of failed policies and towards a healthy, safe societies as outlined in our report Beyond Prevent. So, I mean, if the government really genuinely wanted to listen to alternative opinions out there, right, how do we address this menace of terrorism, for example? Well, you know what? People have actually gone out of their way to actually do research, put policies together to say, and we're talking about a strategy here, an 8-point plan that Cage is advocating, which has got endorsement by over 100 academics and campaigners. So it's not a case of Prevent needing a review. It looks like Prevent needs binning, and it needs quite frankly an alternative approach.
It does.
Would you agree with Cage's stance on the fact is that the Muslim community, should they be engaged, right? And we know that normally happens to a very limited and a very selective audience, that they must boycott the sham review. Would you agree with that position?
Absolutely, and I agree with the plan that they have. It's based on academic research. It's based on activists going out in the field and actually documenting the results of Prevent and looking at the concerns of Muslim communities, as opposed to the governments essentially just being far removed from these realities. So yeah, I do agree with what Cage has said.
Right, and Brother Muhammad Musa, tell me, what is it that you've actually called for more in your article, on Islam 21C? You addressed this, didn't you, in your article? What were your other key points from that article?
Well, specifically regarding what the government should be doing, as I mentioned before, I would say listen to the experts, look at the professors who have actually done research on this issue, and talk to them, listen to them, and hear the recommendations that they have made. And talk to Muslim organizations like Cage, the MCB, the MAB. These organizations, they represent us, and they know us and they understand us. So they are the best people to speak to regarding this issue. If you want to have an independent reviewer, they are the good people to speak to. So that would be my recommendation and my opinion on this matter.
Do you think the government actually speaks to the likes of Cage or speaks to the likes of MCB? I know once upon a time, MCB was actually being positioned as a vehicle for communication with the government, but that was dropped. The favor of the MCB was dropped a long time ago, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. And frankly, the government should be speaking to these national organizations that represent Muslim communities across the country, because they represent our interests and our concerns. So if the government is true in its intention to approach these issues, then they should speak to these organizations.
Okay, Brother Muhammad Musa, Jazakallah khair for joining us this evening on Friday Night Live. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah feek. It was a pleasure, Hafiz. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Right, listeners, that was Brother Muhammad Musa, who is joining us to give us his view on the government's appointment of Shawcross to lead the review of the Prevent policy. Now, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Cage is calling categorically for a boycott, right? For a boycott must lead to a boycott of the sham review, and it's very clear why they're saying that. Director Muhammad Rabbani said Shawcross's appointment demonstrates government has given up, even pretending that it cares about integrity. What do you think? 01582 481 822 0779 481 822 0779 481 822. Right, inshallah ta'ala, we've got a couple of minutes to go before we go into the commercial break and then come into the last half an hour of the show. What do we have remaining in the last half an hour? We've got another 2 stories to cover for you very, very quickly in the last half an hour. We're going to Peterborough. We're going to Peterborough, subhanAllah. If you haven't been to Peterborough, then you need to join us in a couple of minutes. We're going to be taking you virtually to Peterborough as we speak to one of the councillors there, because the Peterborough Masjid loudspeaker plan for calling the azan has been rejected. Right? So that's not a very positive story, is it? So we're going to try to find out, why did the Peterborough Council reject the loudspeaker plans for calling the azan? I'm sure we could have found a young muazzin, it doesn't have to be an old sheikh, right, who can call the azan in a nice, beautiful voice, mashallah, to the pleasure of many of the listeners, inshallah ta'ala. So we need to find out what's happening in Peterborough. And then after that, inshallah, we're going over to Sri Lanka to cover and to get an update on a very, very serious story. And as some of you may remember, we were covering Sri Lanka's, right, forced, right, cremation of victims of COVID-19, right? So Sri Lankan government has been implementing a policy which was to anyone who passes away as a result of COVID, their body is to be cremated, and of course that has caused a huge amount of stress to Muslim families, and also Buddhist families, right? People who part of their custom and tradition and religion is to bury and not to cremate. But the Sri Lankan government is turning a deaf ear to all pleas. We're going to be trying to get an update, and we're going to be speaking to Brother Luqman Harris, who is a UK-based activist, inshallah. But also going to be speaking to him to get an update. What is the latest situation? That's what we got lined up for you. Don't go away. And if you've got any comments, any thoughts, you know what to do. 01582 481 822 0779 481 822. Inshallah ta'ala is the number. Just a reminder, you are with me, Hafiz Shab'an. It is Friday. It is the 29th of January. It's almost end of January, and we're looking at the beginning of February. Until we come back after the commercial break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
This program will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM.
Inspire 105.1
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Amin Marquis. I've had a great time on Inspire FM, and I think that one of the messages I wanted to promote was just finding yourself and finding your voice and not being afraid to speak out about issues that are prominent and pertinent to you. And of course, keep tuning into Inspire FM 105.1.
Could you look your family in the eyes and tell them you're going out to exercise, not just meeting friends? That you only ever leave home when you really need to? Do you always keep a safe distance and wash your hands the moment you get back? Around 1 in 3 people who have COVID-19 have no symptoms and are spreading it without knowing. Sticking to the rules stops the spread. Stay home. Protect the NHS. Save lives.
हसन केटरिंग, शादी हो या सालगिरह या फिर किसी भी किस्म के फंक्शन के लिए हमारी बेहतरीन सर्विस और शानदार मेन्यू से फायदा उठाएं। हमारे माहिर कुक उम्दा खाना बेहतरीन मसाला जात से तैयार करते हैं। हमारी फखरिया पेशकश चिल्टन होटल हाया करने पर स्पेशल डिस्काउंट हासिल करें। अब जदीद तकाज़ों के साथ बेहतरीन हॉल, उम्दा सजावट, आला सर्विस। मजीद मालूमात के लिए आज ही कॉल कीजिए 01582 706666 or visit hasancatering.co.uk.
Ideal Properties 20 साल से आपकी खिदमत में पेश आपकी प्रॉपर्टी की सारी जिम्मेदारी अब हमारी। हम अच्छी तरह से जांच पड़ताल करके किराएदार डालते हैं और आपको किराया बर वक्त गारंटी के साथ दिलवाते हैं। अगर आप प्रॉपर्टी किराए पर लेने या फरोख्त करने का सोच रहे हैं तो आज ही हमारे तजुर्बाकार माहिरीन से राब्ता कीजिए 01582 721110 या फिर 01582 696050। Ideal Properties, आपकी मदद हमारा एन फरीजा।
Do you want an Islamic education alongside national curriculum for your child? Al Hikmah School for Boys and Girls are your #1 choice. Last year, we had the highest attainment 8 score in Luton, and the GCSE pass rate in Maths and English was 94%. We teach a full range of subjects, where you can gain up to 10 GCSEs. The school is now registered with the prestigious private school body ISA and uses state-of-the-art facilities, including indoor playing area, playing field, brand new science lab, and IT facilities. Call now to apply for your child on 01582 728 196.
We're facing the biggest health challenge of our generation, and we've shown that together we're stronger than ever. But to keep making a difference, we need to support each other. If you're a man and you've had coronavirus recently, then you might just have the antibodies to help save lives in your blood plasma. That's why we need men to donate. Giving blood plasma is safe, easy, and during this lockdown is considered essential travel. Be the difference. Search Donate Plasma or call 0300 123 2323 today. Shukriya.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من يحرم الرفق يحرم الخير. That whoever is deprived of gentleness is deprived of good.
From the studios of Inspire FM, the time is now 7:30.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Shab'an. It is Friday, the 29th of January 2021. As usual, we are broadcasting live to Luton on 105.1 FM and across our partner stations across the UK. 01582481822. 01582481822 is the number here in the studio. 07779 481 822. 07779 481 for your SMS, WhatsApp messages. We are, of course, broadcasting live also on Facebook, also on YouTube. So do tune in. Do remember to like us. Like tonight's show on Facebook. Leave us your comments. Want to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your perspective on things. It's been an interesting evening, hasn't it? I think it has. We've covered a number of interesting stories. We started off with the mega rich recoup COVID losses in record time, yet billions will live in poverty for at least a decade. What I'm talking about is the combined wealth of the world's 10 richest men increased by $540 billion during the coronavirus pandemic, right? That's what we covered. That was the opening story. So if you want to get more information on that story, and you know, wallahi, you should, you need to tune into the tune in to the repeat tomorrow. We moved on to the Dr. Luqman story. The Professor Dr. Luqman, who was imprisoned in Qatar in an undisclosed location for almost 6 months. We covered his story and repeated the interview from Cage last week. That was the second half an hour of the first hour part of the show. And then last half an hour, we have been speaking to Brother Muhammad Musa. Jazakallah khair, Brother Muhammad Musa, for eloquently sharing your thoughts, your opinions on government's appointment of William Shawcross as independent reviewer to prevent strongly denounced by Muslim groups and representatives. And I asked the question, why? The answer is William Shawcross is no independent reviewer. In fact, he's been heading up the Charity Commission. In fact, he's been on the board of a far right-wing organization. And in 2012, as director of the Henry Jackson Society, Shawcross was known to have stated that Europe and Islam is one of the greatest and most terrifying problems of our future. Now let me ask you a question, right? Someone who says Islam is one of the greatest and most terrifying problem of our future, then he's been told to come in and review a policy which targets the Muslims. Well, what do you think? What do you think? How independent do you think this chap's going to be? Right? That's the question. How independent is this chap going to be? Well, under his leadership of the Charity Commission was accused of institutional racism against Muslim communities. And the commission was also wrongly accused. The commission wrongfully accused Muslim charities of using donations to fund extremist groups. Now, I got a couple of statements earlier from the MCB, from Cage, Dal Babu, a former senior Metropolitan Police chief, he condemned the selection of Shawcross, right? So this is not me, this is not Cage, this is not MCB, but this is Mr. Babu. Mr. Babu, who is a former senior Metropolitan Police Chief. Now even he understands the crack here. He condemned the selection of Shawcross, noting that Shawcross is a man, and I quote, who has demonstrated lack of independence in matters involving the Muslim community, and sadly this is a missed opportunity to develop an effective program that safeguards our children. Now you can see, right, it is not just Mr. Shab'an, it's not Mr. Muazzam Beg, it's not Dr. Rabbani, it is not Muhammad Musa, right? It is even the people from the very same institutions of government that are saying this is a missed opportunity. But my point here is Mr. Babu is making a fact that it required someone credible to lead the independent review, but majority of the Muslims are unanimous in saying that this policy doesn't require a review. This policy requires an overhaul. That's what it required, an overhaul, right? And subhanAllah, unfortunately, that's not the case. And you know what? It really begs the question and really raises, quite frankly, question marks around the government credibility. And that was my bigger and deeper question. Now, I know some people will, point fingers towards me and say, oh, Sha'ban, you're being cynical. Just because of this one policy, it doesn't mean that we just undermine and we just don't give any credibility to the government at all. But my point to you is, if the government doesn't listen to its citizens and can't put, and understand genuinely the interests of the Muslim community here in the UK as citizens of the UK, then what do you expect the government to do for you when it comes to international issues of Muslims internationally? I don't think it cares at all. I don't know what you think, whether it's the problems of Kashmir or the problems of Palestine or the problems of the Uyghurs or the Rohingya or Syria, and the list continues. And yet we go to the government and ask them to help us in those issues when we're saying, on the other hand, they're completely being disingenuous when it comes to prevent. That's my point. Anyway, all right, I think we've got the next guest lined up. Excellent. So we are going to Peterborough. So I did promise you to take you to Peterborough. So we are going to be taking you to Peterborough, where it's an interesting story, with the Peterborough Mosque loudspeaker plans for daily call to prayer have been rejected. Right, we're hopefully trying to speak to Councillor Ansar Ali Sab, volunteer at Masjid Ghothia, and supported the plan for the azan to be played on the loudspeakers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, brother Councillor Ansar Ali Sab.
Wa alaikum salam, brother. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Nice to have you on Friday Night Live, brother Ansar Ali. Tell us, brother Ansar Ali, what's going on? Why has the Peterborough Council rejected your plans?
Okay, some months back, our mosque, Masjid Ghothia in Peterborough, had a number of people, worshippers, who really asked it would be nice during these challenging times to have the azan broadcast on the speakers in a small area, which is predominantly Muslim, basically, around the mosque. And the mosque management committee decided to put an application in to the local authority and see if it will allow it to broadcast the azan on the speakers. And unfortunately, earlier this week, we had a meeting of the panel, Planning and Environmental Protection Committee, and sadly, they rejected our application. They refused it, and we are very, very disappointed. And it's not that it was rejected, but some of the language that was being used by some of the elected councillors, the total ignorance of the azan, how it sounds like, was really, really deplorable.
Right. So, brother Ansar Ali, let me ask you a question. Right. Some people think I might be having a bit of a laugh here, but I'm not. Did you manage to put a nice, beautiful, melodious azan together by a young, mashallah, alim or young muazzin, as opposed to one of our sheikhs giving the azan, mashallah, may Allah bless them, which perhaps wasn't as appealing.
No, it wasn't because you're not allowed. There's only short space of time, and that wasn't something I did ask. They said that's not something that they would want to listen. But we did try to tell them that it's a beautiful sound. We got young people within our Medina Academy who will be training up to be muazzins and teachers and what have you. And inshallah, they will sound beautiful to the local community. And I gave lots of examples where people have embraced the call of azan because it's so soothing, spiritually uplifting, not just to Muslims, but non-Muslims as well. I mean, you may be aware of this that, when you Google, and many of your listeners may be familiar with an actor by the name of Liam Neeson. His last movie he was shooting in Istanbul in Turkey, and he was interviewed. And if you listen to that interview, although they're talking to him about experience of shooting in Istanbul in Turkey, but he spent a long time talking about this call to prayer, the azan. And in it, he says, this guy who's a Roman Catholic says that the first week because it's not something that he'd heard before, it sounded a bit strange. But after that, it grew on him. It was so beautiful. And whenever he was traveling in the car, he was telling people to turn the radio down so he could hear the azan, because it was feeling inside him. And I'm sure that local people feel like that if they were given the opportunity. But it's not the end of the road. We are going to go back again, and we're going to try again, inshallah.
We'll come on to that, Brother Ansar Ali. But I'm just afraid that in your application, you didn't mention that people might listen to the azan and become Muslims, did you?
No. I mean, look, in Islam, there's no compulsion, okay? It's a religion of peace, love, and harmony. People decide to become Muslims through their own free will. I, as a Muslim, have got no responsibility, may Allah forgive me, to force anyone to become a Muslim, okay? It's only those who Allah wants to guide, they will be guided. Right. And I think, so our intention is not that. Our intention to embrace diversity, and it's never also to, the chairman of the mosque spoke very eloquently as well, and he said to the committee alongside myself that, look, give us an 18-month trial, and if there is an overwhelming number of people who live locally and tell them, look, this is annoying, this is unacceptable, if there's we will be the first ones to come to you and say, no, sorry, we're not going to start broadcasting it anymore because there's too many people who feel that it's interfering with their quality of life. We know it, but if that is the case, we as Muslims, we respect our neighbors. We are taught to not to disturb them, to look after them. So, we will do that as well. But we, did everything that we could to try and convince them that, we are going to, do everything by the book, by the law of the land, if we were given the permission. And any conditions they would put in, we will actually also abide by them as well.
Councillor Sabu, we did contact Peterborough City Council. They weren't available to join us tonight. Instead, they provided a statement. So I got to read the statement. Peterborough City Council spokesman said, at its meeting today, members at the City Council's Planning and Environment Protection Committee considered a planning application for a call to prayer to be given at the Ghosia Masjid. Having carefully looked at the proposal and listened to the case for and against, along with the limited information supplied by the applicant, councillors decided to refuse planning permission. This was on the ground that the call to prayer would have an unwelcome intrusion on the city's soundscape for nearby properties. Thereby, it contradicts the city's adopted Peterborough local plan and noise stipulations in the planning policy framework. What do you say to that?
I have served as a councillor for a number of years. And if you look at that report, I would encourage you to actually look at that report. There was nothing in that report that categorically suggested that what we are planning to do is going to go against any of the council's existing policies, okay? This was a judgment that they had made. They hadn't heard the call to prayer before, so they got nothing to compare it with, basically.
Why are they saying along with the limited information supplied by the applicant? Why would you provide limited information for?
We provided all the information. They asked about the duration of the time, the area that it would cover. We actually hired a planning guy. We actually filled in the form. The mosque committee did that. I wasn't involved directly in that. They provided all the information as far as I'm aware that they were asked, and they also said to the council that we want to work with you. If there is any, it's the first time we're making the application. It's probably the first time that you're considering this application as well. Please work with us so that we got all the information together that you require. There's nothing missing, so that we can you can make a proper decision. So the mosque committee went as far as asking the council, look, give us some guidance, give us some advice, and together we can work through this together so that we can show Peterborough as a diverse city that welcomes everyone, that embraces the needs of 20,000 plus Muslims in the city.
Right, Councillor Ansar Ali, mashallah, very articulate. You sound very convincing to me, but of course not unfortunately convincing enough for the Peterborough City Council. Very quickly, what are your next steps?
Well, apparently there was a technical hiccup in the way that the consultation took place. I was actually on an email to the head of planning this morning, and so he's going to go back to another committee in March, inshallah. And we will do that. There's a bit more I could say, because there was a racist organization that was distributing leaflets inciting people to object. But I know you're short of time, so I wouldn't take up more of your time.
We will catch up with you, inshallah ta'ala, when there's an update, inshallah, on your situation. Jazakallah khair, Councillor Ansar Ali.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Right, listeners, that was, as I said to you, I'm going to take you to Peterborough, and I did take you to Peterborough. That was Councillor Ansar Ali, and we were all the way in Peterborough. Right, it's time to come back and become a bit more serious in my tone, inshallah, and cover a very kind of a very distressing story that we've covered previously. Jazakallah khair to all of our Sri Lankan community who did communicate, who did get in touch with the radio station and acknowledge that this is a very important story that the radio platform should be covering, and indeed we did cover, and that was with regards to Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan government and its forced cremation of COVID-19 victims. We have, or hopefully on the line, Brother Luqman Haris, who is a UK-based writer, author, political commentator of Sri Lankan heritage. MashaAllah, an author, speaker at international events, and he has been covering, writing, and discussing Sri Lankan issues for many years. Brother Luqman Haris, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Friday Night Live.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you, brother?
Alhamdulillah, great to have you with us this evening. Unfortunately, we're covering a very sad story, right? That is the case. But otherwise, lovely to have you this evening. We covered this story actually a couple of weeks ago when the news broke out, and we had a lot of our local Sri Lankan community, Muslim community members contact us, and Jazakallah khair for covering this story. Why don't you bring us up to speed? Because I read the headline that Sri Lankan government has rejected the UN demand to stop the forced cremations, right? So what is the latest? Give us an update on what is the situation.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, brother, for the opportunity, and I'm sure the Sri Lankan Muslim community is very much grateful to your station. What I want to take you is that, the world over, we have this corona pandemic, and unfortunately in some parts of, in the West as well as in Asia, there is another pandemic that has, taken root. That is, that's a parallel pandemic. That is the corona racism pandemic. What was different in Sri Lanka was that apart, this pandemic had that straight patronage as well. And we used to call them, it's a state-sanctioned racism and discrimination. What happened was, brother, this has a long story about 1 year, but this all started when the the government regulations, allowed, and they agreed to follow the WHO guidelines to allow both options, the cremation as well as the burial option. And that's a practice that has been followed by over 190 countries. They did allow at the very start, but unfortunately, the second death in Sri Lanka was a Muslim. And the whole thing changed. And they, without any notice, at the time that even the community was making arrangements to arrange for the burial of this brother who died in the south, the western region. Unfortunately, they actually, the whole thing turned topsy-turvy, and they cremated the first person. From there, now 1 year on, now fast forward 1 year, we have about 280 the corona patients who have died, and out of which more than half of the victims were Muslims. And unfortunately, among them, we have two babies as well. One was a 6 months a baby, a 20-day-old baby, 20-day-old baby, as well as a 2 months old baby as well. So among these, there are lots of things that are happening. For example, there were a lot of cases among them who were actually suspected to be COVID, not even COVID confirmed as well. And this was something going on. And brother, I need to put all this into perspective. And this was not the only occasion where the Muslims were, targeted. As you know, after this unfortunate incident which happened in April 2019, the Easter bomb attack, right? And the government actually, the very racist media, with the patronage or the blessings of the government in power, they actually tried to demonize the Muslim community and wanted the whole community to assume guilt, for the acts of a few, this is what happened. And this whole thing was going on, which led to the, election of a very nationalist, ultra-nationalist government in November 2019. And ever since then, this has been taking, much, wings. And after this corona thing, and this whole thing was, taking, the tempo was increasing, and which led to this. Now, as it stands now, there are lots, yeah.
Yes, go on, brother.
Now, I just want to give you some, background to this. Now, this thing.
Brother, we have about 2 minutes left, so we need to. What I need to understand from you. Okay, you've given us the background. What's happening? What is the current situation with regards to what is the Muslim community in Sri Lanka doing, right? And what can we, as Muslim community outside of Sri Lanka, do to support the raising of awareness and support the Muslim community in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm trying to say was there was no medical or public health, basis for this. All the well-known the medical bodies in Sri Lanka has told that there is no basis. You can allow for burial, but even then, the government is taking their racist agenda forward. Now, what has happened was the United Nations actually, as you said, took this matter up, and they have the rapporteurs have already issued two important statements. The latest one was saying that to stop it. They were very much emphatic in their language, and the way forward is, my brother, is that the Muslim Council of Britain in England, actually they have formed a task force, and where I am also there, and some few of the other community leaders in UK, and we are actually doing lots of work to take. First, number one is to take this to raise the awareness among the Muslim leaders, including the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, OIC, and also the other world leaders. And the number two is to take this to the complaint to before the United Nations Human Rights Committee. And the number third is there is this. The United Nations Human Rights Council is coming up in March, and we are actually lobbying the Muslim leaders as well to take this up and to speak on behalf of us to ensure that the government, it's not the people, it's the government who should be held to account, right? So that is what. So what we want is your leadership is to understand that there is a problem of demonization going on in Sri Lanka. We want your support, your verbal, as well as take this to your MPs in their region. Already the foreign secretary has taken up with the Sri Lankan government, and they have promised that they will take it further at the Human Rights Council as well. So we want your leadership to understand the plight and make dua for us, for the Muslims of Sri Lanka, and also raise the awareness and also take this up so that the government of Sri Lanka will be held to account for the racist agenda they are pursuing.
Brother Luqman Haris, fantastic to have you on our show this evening. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but Jazakallah khair, our du'as are with you, our support is with you. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm sure the community feels it. Keep up the good work, and we will speak to you, inshallah ta'ala, in a few weeks' time to get an update.
Okay, thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Right, listeners, that is Friday Night Live, and it's almost 8 o'clock, right? Which suggests to me that it's time to wrap up this evening's show. I want to say Jazakallah khair to our producers for lining up for some fantastic guests this evening. Jazakallah khair for the Nakash. And I want to say Jazakallah khair to all our listeners for joining tonight's discussion and debate. Do remember to like, do remember to leave a comment, do remember to get in touch with our social media platforms. And it's always good to hear from you and your feedback on our shows and our stories. If you want us to cover any particular story next week or in our future shows, you know what to do. But until next week, it is Hafiz Shab'an, and it is Friday Night Live, and it's Friday the 29th of January. Until next week, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.